As countries lie frozen in lockdown and millions of people lose their livelihoods, public figures are teasing a breakthrough that will mark the end of the crippling coronavirus pandemic, a vaccine. But there's another, a worst-case possibility, that no vaccine will be developed. In this outcome, the public's hopes are repeatedly raised and then dashed as various proposed solutions fall before the final hurdle. Politicians are speaking very optimistically about this topic, as human trials of potential vaccines are already underway. But the possibility is still taken very seriously by many experts, because it's happened before. In 1984, the US Secretary of Health and Human Services announced at a press conference that scientists had successfully identified the virus that later became known as HIV. They predicted that a preventative vaccine will be available for testing in 2 years. That was 36 years ago, and we're still looking for that vaccine. Although to be fair, that's probably not a very good comparison, as the influenza virus only changes itself once a year, which is why we need a new flu shot every year. HIV does that during a single infection. COVID-19 does not possess that level of elusiveness, making experts generally more optimistic about finding a vaccine. But no matter what, the process of developing a vaccine is always a slow and painful one. We're dealing with biological machines, not mechanical ones. They simply cannot give this vaccine to every human on this planet before they're 100% sure that it won't kill us 10 years later. Biologically, there's nothing we can do to speed up this process. If the fate of the HIV vaccine befalls on COVID-19, the virus could remain with us for many years. So what happens then? In HIV, we've been able to make that a chronic disease with antivirals. We've done what we've always hoped to do with cancer. Contracting HIV today is not the death sentence it was in the 1980s. Likewise, a number of treatments are being tested for COVID-19, as scientists hunt for Plan B in parallel to the current vaccine trials. But all of those trials are in very early stages. The knock-on effects of a successful treatment plan will be felt tremendously. If a treatment can decrease a patient's average time spent in the ICU by even just a few days, it will free up hospital capacity and could therefore greatly increase the willingness of governments to open up society. But no treatment is going to prevent infections from occurring. As more people build immunity, the coronavirus will be easier to manage and the pandemic would subside. But the disease could be with us for many years into the future. Instead of wiping out COVID-19, for now, we might have to consider living with it. Cities will slowly open, and some freedom will be returned, but on a short leash. If experts' recommendations are followed, testing and physical tracing will become part of our lives in the short term. But in many countries, an abrupt instruction to isolate could come at any time. Treatments may be developed, but outbreaks of the disease could still occur each year, and the global death toll will continue to tick upwards. We'll have no choice but to live with it, as the lockdown is simply not sustainable economically. This means that the culture of shrugging off a cough or cold-like symptoms and trudging into work will be over. A permanent change in attitude towards remote working, with working from home, at least on some days, becoming the new way of life. And companies will be expected to shift their rotations so that offices are never full unnecessarily. Those systems could allow for some social interactions to return. If there's minimal transmission, it may indeed be possible to open things up for sporting events and other large gatherings. But such a move would not be permanent and will be continuously assessed by governments and public health authorities. That means that major sporting events such as the NBA could go ahead with their schedules, as long as athletes are getting regularly tested and fans are separated within the stands. However, those could be shut down at any time if the threat rises. Overcrowded bars and pubs are probably the last on the list. They could reopen as restaurants with social distancing policies strictly enforced. Some European countries are starting to allow restaurants to serve customers at vastly reduced capacity. Restrictions are most likely to come back over the winter though, as COVID-19 could peak every winter until a vaccine is introduced. And lockdowns, many of which are in the process of gradually being lifted, could return at any moment. From time to time, there will be outbreaks. Heads of states over the world are going to figure out the balance between the crippling economy and the death toll. When we do find a vaccine, production will undoubtedly become the top priority of the entire world, but it will still take time. New problems will arise regarding the distribution of these vaccines. Depending on the production speed, This might cause unprecedented political tension around the world as countries compete to be the first to be vaccinated. Even the difference of a few months of time can greatly impact the economy. The scenario public health experts fear most is a worldwide fight in which manufacturers sell only to the highest bidders. Wealthy countries will buy up all the supplies, and nations where manufacturers are located hoard vaccine for their own citizens. Even if you live in a country such as South Korea, who has COVID-19 under control, your best efforts against the virus are not going to work unless you keep all your borders and trades shut down. Who knows what will unfold in the next few months, but public health as we know it is probably never going to be the same.